Christian Parenting.
Do your kids know the story of your life? Have they heard about your big God moments? Join us today for Family Vision.
Hi, my name's Rienow. Welcome to Family Vision with my parents, Dr. Rob and Amy Rienow, strengthening families through practical, encouraging, and real conversation.
Hi, Rob Rienow here with Visionary Family Ministries alongside my bride, Amy.
Great to be here today.
We had a celebration last week, March 7th, Acapulco Day. We had tacos and streamers and Mexican pop and mariachi music. Now, you may be feeling left out, that somehow you missed Acapulco Day, but March 7th is the day we got engaged. 1994, on vacation with your parents in Acapulco. Henceforth, that's a day we mark on the calendar and try to do something to celebrate and tell the story to the kids. Honey, what do you remember about that day?
Well, I just remember, I'm not sure if everybody knows that we dated for 5 months, engaged for 5 months, pretty short time of first date to wedding. And what I think about Acapulco Day is it was a lot of first in the sense that my parents had asked you to come on vacation for you had never done anything like that with me before. There was a lot of firsts, and you were coming off a very intense retreat, like youth ministry retreat, winter retreat. So you weren't flying with us, and you were coming later and had to go through Mexico City at like 3 a.m. in the morning or something. And I was just a little anxious about you getting there. And so I think that what I remember is just, well, I expected that we might get engaged sometime soon. It just was I was very surprised, when you asked me that night, because it was a lot of new, and then it became the day,
Well,
So,
I arrived on a Monday morning, I think 7 a.m. You and your parents maybe were down having breakfast when I came from the airport. And I wasn't sure at what point in the week that I was going to ask you to marry me, but basically it was the first night I was there. I'm like, we gotta get this, done, and it was wonderful. 9:30 at night out on the beach and asking you to marry me.
It was very simple, and I think that's one of the things that I really actually appreciate about it. So it was just a very exciting day, and I'll never forget you on one knee on the beach, asking me, and the words kind of blur together, but
I think I got the key ones.
The key ones were out. You got those
part
out for sure. Yeah, but I can probably remember a few more. But it was just an amazing week then. It was a wonderful time. But specifically, you talking about, I really appreciate how you really are the one who kind of initiated in our family celebrating this day and calling it Acapulco
Day.
I can't say it the way you do.
Properly.
I know, I can't do that. But my one just funny story about that, I remember one time we were celebrating at Front Street Cocina in Wheaton, which was where I was waitressing when we met too. So it was kind of a nice, fun place to go eat Mexican food and celebrate, because that's where I was working. And we ran into my good friend Stephanie there, and she was there with her husband. We said we were out celebrating Acapulco Day, and she goes, wait. I said, because we got engaged today. And she's like, you got engaged on Acapulco Day? I'm so jealous. I should have gotten engaged on Acapulco Day. And I was like, Stephanie, that's not really a day. I'm sorry. She was so funny. It made me laugh so hard. I'm like, I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny.
But this got us thinking about the importance of sharing and remembering and telling these family stories, these important moments. One of the scriptures on this is Psalm 78:4. It says, "Tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might and the wonders that he has done." So it's not just the things in the Bible, but the wonders that he's done in our lives as well. And so Acapulco Day has been one example of us being able to tell this story to our kids, this big marker, this big moment of God bringing us together in engagement, and even sitting down or at the end of dinner, the other night with our tacos, said, okay, I'm going to tell you the story. And some of the little ones are like, all right. And some of the older ones are, do we have to hear it again?
Of course.
Like, well, yeah, I'm glad you know it so well that you feel like it's been done.
Yeah, I don't think this was our original idea. So I don't know who or where we got the idea, but we somehow stumbled across the idea of interviewing our grandparents. And you have been going through our old videos and coming across where we took the time to have our kids sit down with questions even and interviewed both of my sets of grandparents and then your mom and Jack, and just for that same purpose of recording their stories of how they met and even how they came to know the Lord. And I really cherish that we have those things because now even our younger kids have no memory of that. Those were done more with our older kids. But the reality is we live in such a fast-paced world that if we don't take the time to do these things, we really risk our kids never knowing those stories. And when we were intentional with those interviews, I think what surprised me is how much I learned about my own grandparents because of taking the time to do that.
Right, and it reminded us when we came across those videos of the interview with Dee Dee and Pop, your grandparents, how sometimes in a family where you have an age range of kids, you've done something with the older ones and you sort of check that box, oh, we've done that, but the younger ones have never experienced it. So just the other day we were sitting down saying, well, we really need to have Ray and Rush and Millie, our youngest, interview your parents because we don't have that video recording of them so that these stories get told. These and it's not just all the happy stories, right? It's times that God proved faithful during hard times. And these conversations also can happen in informal ways, telling our life stories to our kids. One of the things, the habit that I've gotten into lately when I've been traveling for ministry trips with the kids is I ask them while we're driving, maybe from the airport to the hotel or whatever, say, okay, I want you to ask me a question about my life growing up. Yeah. Anything you want to ask me, Dad, what was life like for you here? Or what did you do then? So on our last trip, Ray and Rush asked me what TV was like growing up. So I first of all, explained to them kind of what TVs looked like, right? These big rectangular square things, and explained there's channels knobs on the front, like your stove or your oven, and there's 13 channels, and then there's this thing called UHF, and the UHF can go from whatever it is, 30 to I don't even remember what the numbers are. And then I told them about the TV guide. The TV guide came in the mail, and it was the schedule for the week of whatever shows. And if you wanted to watch a show at that day and time, you had to go to your television and turn it on the proper channel, and you could watch it. And if you didn't watch it at that time, you couldn't watch it. Like there was no watching it later. And no matter how many times I explained that part to them, they could not get their brains around that if you missed it, you couldn't watch it.
That made no sense.
Later. It made absolutely no sense.
Well, that is a great, boy, you brought memory lane for me. I forgot about TVs like that. But just going back to this idea of importance of telling stories and taking the time to do it, you just mentioned that, we hadn't interviewed my parents, and that's just a classic example because we live 10 minutes away from my parents we always had, and that is why we haven't taken that special time. The people that are in your lives and are in your lives daily, you often overlook as far as asking deeper questions because your life is so filled with the comings and goings of everyday things. It's not like it's a special visit. And I think that's important to understand that you make, when you're living close to people, like not to take that for granted, to have those special moments. And
you're absolutely right.
One thing that we did, it's a tradition we kind of lost sight of, but it was a powerful tradition, is about around your dad and him being born on St. Patrick's Day. And we just happened to live in the town, just for people to understand that your dad had 4 marriages, children from each of those marriages. And he had a daughter from the first marriage who's always lived geographically close to us. And one thing that connected all of us is that we would get together with your sister on St. Patrick's Day, celebrate St. Patrick's Day, but really we were celebrating the life of your dad.
Right.
And even though you didn't grow up with her, that created this close bond with her because we would take the time to have this celebration just to talk about who your dad was. And since he died even before Ray was born, even
3 of our children hardly ever met him.
Right. So just so that they have some picture and even remembering the date of his birthday like that.
Mm-hmm. And honey, you were telling me the other day about poems your Aunt Melinda would write about family and family memories by way of keeping these stories in front of the family. What was that about?
Yeah, that's something that has stuck with me. My dad's side of the family, they did a really good job with family celebration, and something that I remember very, very well, like going down to celebrate my grandparents' 40th wedding anniversary and certain birthday parties. But my aunt would always write a poem about the occasion. And it was a funny poem. And within that poem, there'd be little bits and pieces of their story. And that's kind of how I know my grandparents' story the most, is through my aunt's poems. And she so inspired me that I took the time to write a poem like that when my parents both turned 60, because, as your parents get old, it's so hard to figure out, where are you going to get these people? Like, they don't need anything, And I was touched by my aunt's intentionality, by that she would put that much creativity into these poems about her parents. It was just a great gift. I always loved hearing them.
Yeah, and some of our encouragement for you today with being intentional about sharing these family stories, sharing your big life moments. It's not just the happy stuff.
Right.
We want our kids, especially as they get older, to know the highs, but also know the lows. So as our kids have gotten older, they've learned about my parents' divorce and how God proved himself faithful to us during those times, providing a house for us to live in. They've heard the story about my dad's conversion at the age of 90, 3 weeks before he died. These are like huge God moments in my life. And just because I've had those experiences where the Lord met me and proved himself to me in a very special way, I want there to be a ripple effect forward in the future generations so that our kids know those stories, that they know about God's faithfulness to their mom and to their dad, so that they can cling on to those things as well when they're facing difficult times.
And as you're saying that, there's also just two things that come to my mind about this issue of remembering and how important it is, and just specifically how our culture, our American culture, is really not good at it. I mean, really not good at it. I watched the movie Coco with my kids. It's a Disney movie years ago. And even though it was about the Mexican holiday, Day of the Dead, which obviously we don't celebrate here, and I would never agree with the theology behind it, but what kind of touched me about it was that it was really about a day of remembering your family, remembering the people that have gone before you, and celebrating their lives and just simply reflecting on that. And I just think it convicted me, actually. It really convicted me that I hadn't even thought about that. I mean, not just who my parents are, but not just my grandparents, my great-grandparents. And just kind of like, what can we do to make sure we are, telling those stories and honoring the generations? And it occurred to me, I have a very good friend who, in her kids' rooms, from the time her kids were babies, she had portraits of both sets of grandparents when they were young in those rooms. And when I think about the way we normally decorate houses, the pictures on our walls are pretty much filled with our kids. You know what I mean? Like, notice us. And it was really inspiring to me to see how intentional she was with, these are the pictures in her kids' rooms. Her kids are looking at their grandparents in their prime. This is who you came from. These are people that you're connected to show our kids, not just our grandparents in their old age, but in the prime of their life as well, so that they have a picture of that.
Yeah. So it's sharing family stories, it's sharing family histories. Here's a specific thing. Do your kids know your testimony? Do they know your salvation story? Could they repeat it back to you by way of having this be something in their life, that's a glorious deed of the Lord, that's a wonder that he has done? Let me tell you how God saved my dad. Let me tell you how God saved my mom. Well, before we wrap up, I want to tell you about an upcoming online parenting conference being hosted by our ministry partners at Christianparenting. It's called the Parent with Purpose Conference. It launches April 8th. There's 40 speakers, all sorts of topics related to Christian parenting. I'll be talking about discipline that shapes the heart. How do we respond to bad behavior in us or the kids in a way that's different than quit it, kid, or stop that? Now, the cool thing is once the conference goes live, you can watch the episodes anytime. The link you need to purchase is visionaryfam.com/purpose. Early bird tickets are on sale for the next 2 days, $29. visionaryfam.com/purpose. Thanks for spending this time with us. Our relationship with you means a lot. Do you have a prayer need for your family right now? Send us an email, podcast@visionaryfam.com, podcast@visionaryfam.com, and we'll join you in prayer for that need. And we look forward to our next time together with you on Family Vision.